Welcome to this edition of Texas Border Watch. I'm Jordan Elder. Crossings are way down at the southern border, but the number of personnel is way up. That includes Texas DPS, Border Patrol, the military. So that means if migrants are still wanting to illegally cross, they're having to get more creative in order to avoid all of the people and equipment that's now down at the border. There was a recent crossing attempt in Eagle Pass that really, you've got to see to believe. Let me set the scene for you. A man is sitting in his house in an Eagle Pass neighborhood about 5 blocks from the border. He sees a man wearing all black walking in a drainage area. So he sees this and he thinks, okay, this person is dressed in all black by a neighborhood. They're probably going to go try to break into houses. So he calls police, and police are only about 3 blocks away, so they get there pretty quickly. But what they find is not a potential robber. Here is a full look at how this unfolded. It all started in a neighborhood about 5 blocks from the border. A concerned resident called 911 after seeing someone lurking near this drainage area.
He was all dressed in black clothing, and his suspicion was that he might be trying to get into some houses.
Senior police officer Humberto Garza says when police arrived, they caught these 2 men from Guatemala and Mexico. And it quickly became clear that this was no normal crossing attempt.
Well, the black clothing turned out to be wetsuits. They also had these devices I think I've only seen in, like maybe the James Bond type movies.
Water propulsion devices, sometimes called underwater scooters.
Or the assumption is that they use them to navigate through the treacherous Rio Grande to cross over onto this side.
How rare is that?
That's a first for us. We saw that and we're like, we couldn't believe it.
These devices typically go for $400 to $800 depending on the retailer. Likely a bit cheaper if they were purchased in Mexico, but still a major expense. And Garza says it's no coincidence the migrants were found in this area.
They were probably trying to either hop the train or they were waiting for somebody to pick them up.
The migrants were turned over to Border Patrol, who also noticed the cinematic nature of this attempt. The Del Rio sector posting this video of the migrants set to Mission Impossible music. We're told both men were processed for expedited removal. What does that tell you about the times that we're in now, that people would go to this extent to fly under the radar and get expensive devices like this?
If somebody wants to get through, they're going to make every attempt and find every possible way they can.
This river is very dangerous. You have those whirlpools, and that's why we have a lot of drownings here.
Maverick County Sheriff Tom Schmerber says this was a method he'd never seen before, but he wasn't surprised to see migrants going to these lengths to cross.
We are specifically reinforcing the border.
In the last few months, the federal government has sent troops, military vehicles, and more resources to the southern border, raising the stakes for would-be crossers. Do you expect to see more creative attempts like that because there are so many more resources at the border right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to be people, they're very creative. If they want to come over here, they are going to try.
Crossing numbers may be down in Eagle Pass and Maverick County, but law enforcement says this is a plot they've seen for years. When one door closes, a new tactic emerges. And this is not the only creative attempt Eagle Pass police tell me they've seen over the course of the last few years. One of the more notable stories they told me is about a woman who tried to ship herself inside a FedEx box to get further into Texas. They were able to apprehend her before that happened. And then Border Patrol agents say they're noticing a new trend as well, where people will cut pieces of carpet and then attach them to the bottom of their shoes, and they call them carpet shoes, which is fitting. Essentially what this does is it makes it so that you don't leave footprints in the dirt at the border, so it makes it harder for agents to follow you. Again, crossings are way down, and authorities say that they're usually able to apprehend people, especially in these creative attempts, but they say this is really just the beginning, probably, of the attempts that we're going to see in the future. Several new military vehicles have arrived here in Texas after the federal government deployed them at the beginning of March. This is a Stryker vehicle. It's got 8 wheels and can fit about 11 people inside, and these have recently rolled out in the Border Patrol's El Paso sector. And that's not all. This ship is a Navy missile destroyer. It's called the USS Gravely, and it's being deployed into the Gulf right now, aimed at stopping illegal immigration, drug trafficking, weapon trafficking attempts. So this is just part of the federal government's bigger effort to be present at the southern border, sending thousands of military troops to be there as well. ramping up efforts. We actually are getting more information about the role that these Stryker vehicles will play in El Paso, so we're going to bring you that on next week's Texas Border Watch. We've shown you what it looks like when migrants get arrested for illegally crossing the southern border, but what about at the end of the process when they're getting ready to be returned to the country where they came from? Aryami Virhan got an inside look at this process, and she's going to show you how it works.
We have seen how migrants cross into the U.S. illegally through the Rio Grande. But this is the first time we're allowed to record the process of how they're deported or expelled at the U.S.-Mexico border. Photojournalist Paul Sanchez and I arrived at the Firefly Processing Center around 7 a.m. to follow the first group of the day being sent back to Mexico. Acting Chief of Border Patrol Del Rio Sector, Milton Moreno, met us at the area where migrants are brought out and board buses under the watchful eye of agents.
We transfer them over to our processing facility. There we vet their records. We ensure that they are, who they claim to be. And if they don't have any criminal charges pending here in the U.S.
If they do have charges, they will not be released to Mexico so easily.
Those that do have a criminal history are processed accordingly and turned over to ICRO for further detention and processing.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, can hold them longer while they investigate their records and determine if they can repatriate them to their country of origin. This morning, those without a criminal record are being placed on buses and sent to one of the bridges in Eagle Pass, Texas. This process happens daily in coordination with Mexico's immigration authorities.
We are able to quickly return these illegal aliens back into Mexico, and the government of Mexico has been a great partner in accepting the CVNHs as we talked about, so Cuban, Venezuelans, Haitians, Nicaraguas, and here recently they added Central Americans, Guatemalans, Salvador, and Honduras, and obviously the Mexican nationals.
Executive order signed by President Donald Trump now allows this group, which previously had temporary protected status or TPS, to be deported.
Every day we coordinate with government of Mexico, our counterparts in Mexican immigration. We turn over the illegal aliens over to them, and we tend to do them during daylight hours between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Where do they go from there?
From there, Mexico either takes them into the interior of Mexico, Mexico City, by bus or by plane, and some into their native country.
Acting Chief Moreno says this system seems to be helping reduce the number of migrants who attempt to return illegally to the U.S. Are you seeing people come back?
We have not. In years past, we used to see that recidivism where you apprehend the same person on 3 consecutive days. We have not seen that now because you return them back into the interior of Mexico or to their native country, and it makes it more difficult for them to start that journey again.
One by one, 4 buses filled with migrants arrive and passengers are unloaded. As you can see, all traffic stopped at the bridge. They are then transferred to Mexican immigration buses under the supervision of Mexican immigration officers. What are you guys doing right now that you have that breathing time?
Well, right now we continue to enforce our laws, and our agents are back out in the field and focusing more on targeting and intelligence and going after the criminal aliens. We continue to work with our partners day to day, whether it be Texas DPS, Texas National Guard, Texas Military Department, local police department here in Eagle Pass and Del Rio, and local sheriffs. So together we continue to enhance border security.
Moreno emphasizes that this is key to keeping the border secure from those who might enter undetected. He also says that the new administration is allowing them to do their job effectively.
Just let us do our job, and we'll enhance not just border security, like I mentioned, but security in the entire country.
That's it for this week's Texas Border Watch. You can read more in-depth versions of all of these stories on our websites, either news4sanantonio.com or foxsanantonio.com. I'm Jordan Elder.